The doctor said it so gently that it took Sera a full 3 seconds to understand what he meant. "Your vocal cords," Dr. Fenwick said, setting down his pen like he was giving her a gift, "have sustained damage consistent with long-term overuse and the subsequent trauma of last month's incident. The scarring is significant." Sera Calloway sat in the examination chair in her coat and her scarf and her audition dress underneath all of it, the one she'd worn for the conservatory panel that morning, and she thought, "He's still talking. There is a possibility of partial recovery with complete vocal rest and rehabilitative therapy." However, for competitive performance at a professional level, "Don't," she said. He stopped. The word had come out wrong, cracked down the middle like something dropped. She hadn't spoken above a whisper in 4 weeks. It was the first time she'd used her voice to stop someone and meant it. Dr. Fenwick folded his hands. He had a kind face. She hated it. She picked up her bag and walked out. Her mother was waiting in the hall, sitting perfectly upright in a chair that was too small for her posture. Marguerite Calloway had been a figure skater in another life before the knees went, and she still carried herself like someone being judged. She looked up when Sera came through the door and read everything in a single glance. "Well," her mother said, that was all. They walked to the car together in the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful. Marguerite drove. Sera stared at the wet November street and pressed her fingers against the window. "The audition this morning," her mother said at a red light. "Gone. The scholarship. Gone." Marguerite made a sound that wasn't quite a sigh. It was the sound of a woman recalculating. "Your Uncle Bertrand called," she said. "He's been in contact with the Vane family. You remember Everett Vane?" Sera did not remember Everett Vane. She had met him once at a family event when she was 14, and he was considerably older than that, a broad, damp-handed man who sold something in real estate or finance, and laughed too loudly at his own observations. "He knows you're available," her mother said. "Available." The word sat in Sera's chest like a stone. "I'm 26. Sera said. "You're 26 with no income, no degree, no performance prospects, and a voice that may never recover." Her mother did not look away from the road. "Everett Vane is established. He has connections. He could stabilize. Mother, Sera, stop the car." She said it quietly, but her mother stopped the car. They were half a block from their building. Sera got out and walked the rest of the way alone, and she stood in the elevator and watched the numbers climb and tried to breathe past the feeling that something enormous was folding shut around her. That night, her Uncle Bertrand came for dinner without being invited. He sat at the kitchen table and talked for 40 minutes about Everett Vane's portfolio and his townhouse in Westmount, and the fact that he'd been married before. Briefly, and that it hadn't worked out, no children, clean record. Sera ate her soup and said nothing. When he finally paused and looked at her expectantly, she looked back and said she needed to sleep. She heard them talking after she closed her bedroom door. "She's being dramatic. She's always been dramatic. She needs to think practically now. The singing was a phase. It was always a phase. A girl like Sera can't build a life on." She put her headphones on. No music, just silence shaped like armor. 3 weeks later, Bertrand came back. He had a contract, an actual document. Her mother had signed the bottom of it. Sera stood in the hallway in her socks and read it twice, and then looked at her mother and said, very carefully, "You signed this." Marguerite didn't flinch. "It's a formal arrangement. It's how these things are done when you signed a contract agreeing to a marriage arrangement without asking me. I am your—" "Don't." There was that word again, cracked and real. "Don't tell me what you are." She left that night. She took her coat and her hard drive and her savings card and the green scarf that had been her grandmother's, and she left. She didn't know where she was going. She walked 4 blocks in the cold before she thought of Polly. Polly Deschaines was Sera's oldest friend and a certified disaster in most respects. She kept her coffee in the bathroom and her shampoo on the kitchen counter and had twice locked herself out of her own storage unit. But she opened the door at 11 p.m. without a word and handed Sera a blanket and a mug of something warm, and Sera sat on the couch and cried for the first time since Dr. Fenwick's office. "Your mum actually signed a contract," Polly said. not as a question. With my uncle's signature as witness. Sera, that's not legal, I know. I mean, it's probably not legally binding in any province of... I know, Polly. Polly was quiet for a moment. Then okay, what do you need? What Sera needed was a job. Not a loan, not a favor. A job. Something that paid real money and came with distance from everything she'd just walked away from. She needed to not be in that apartment, not be connected to Bertrand and his paperwork and Everett Vane's townhouse in Westmount. She found the listing on a Thursday afternoon on a domestic staffing agency's website that Polly had bookmarked from a past life as a nanny, private household, live-in position, music tutor and general child supervision. Quebec countryside, 2 hours outside the city, immediate placement. Compensation listed in a range that made Sera read it twice. The name of the household was listed as Vosthorn Estate. She applied. She did not think she would hear back. She heard back in 4 hours. The car that came for her was black and had no visible branding, and the driver spoke only to confirm her name. The highway gave way to regional roads. Regional roads gave way to something older and narrower, and by the time they turned through iron gates flanked by stone pillars, the city was so far behind her that she felt it like a physical thing, a cord finally going slack. The estate appeared through bare November trees. It was not a manor in the film sense, not turrets and parapets. It was a very large house that had been added to over generations until it had its own logic. Wings that didn't quite match, a long covered porch running the east side, windows that were either very old or very good at looking it. Serious, settled, the kind of house that had survived things. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a clipboard met Sera at the front steps and introduced herself as Mrs. Okafor Briggs, the household manager. "Mr. Thorne is not available this afternoon," she said, moving quickly. "I'll show you the rooms and give you the brief, and you'll meet the children before dinner." "Children," Sera said. The listing said general child supervision, but I thought 4 children, ages 4, 7, 10, and 13. The 13-year-old, Griffin, is your primary concern for music. He plays piano, and until recently was enrolled at a conservatory program in the city. A brief pause. "He's no longer enrolled. What happened?" Mrs. Okafor Briggs glanced at her sideways. "You'll understand when you meet him." The rooms were on the 2nd floor, east wing. Small but complete, with a window that looked out over a field that in another season would probably be beautiful, and was now silver-grey and bare, and somehow still more peaceful than anything Sera had looked at in weeks. There was a small desk, a reading lamp, a narrow bookshelf. It felt like somewhere a person could breathe. Mrs. Okafor Briggs gave her a schedule, meals, lesson times, a list of the children's names and ages and what she diplomatically called particular considerations. Griffin Thorne, 13, formally promising. Now, uncommunicative, Emmeline Thorne. 10, academically strong, socially withdrawn, Jules Thorne. 7, energetic to the point of, and here Mrs. Okafor Briggs made a contained gesture with her hand, Ottiline Thorne. 4, the note beside her name simply said, "She bites." Sera looked up. Mrs. Okafor Briggs looked back with the expression of a woman who had survived many things. "Welcome to the Vosthorn household," she said. She met Jules first. He came at her around a corner, at speed, and only narrowly avoided a collision because Sera had grown up with 3 cousins and had functional reflexes. He was small for 7, with dark eyes and a gap in his front teeth and paint on his left elbow. "You're the new one," he said. "I'm Sera." He looked at her for a long moment with the kind of seriousness only small children can achieve. "The last one cried," he said. "Twice, before she left." "I've already done my crying," Sera said. "Should be fine now." Something shifted in his expression. Not trust exactly, more like the faint adjustment of an initial assessment. Emmeline she found in the library, a book open on her lap and her legs folded underneath her, and her gaze fixed not on the page but on the middle distance. She acknowledged Sera's entrance with a look and then looked away. She did not offer her name. Sera did not push. She sat down in the chair across the room and picked up a music theory text that had been left on the side table and read for 20 minutes. And at the end of the 20 minutes, Emmeline said, without looking up, The last tutor used to come in and immediately start talking. Did it help? Emmeline turned a page. No. Ottiline was asleep. Sera looked through the nursery window at a small child with enormous curls and paint also on her left elbow, apparently inherited, and decided to leave well enough alone. Griffin she didn't see until dinner. He came to the table last, sat at the far end and ate without speaking. He was tall for 13, with the particular awkwardness of a boy who had grown fast and not finished deciding what to do with his limbs. He had a bruise on the back of his hand. He caught Sera looking at it and pulled his sleeve down without expression. "You play piano," she said, when there was a natural pause. "Used to," he said. "What happened?" He looked at her then, actually looked at her, like the question had registered differently than he expected. "I quit." "Why?" He picked up his fork. It stopped meaning anything. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Jules said with great authority, "He didn't quit. He got kicked out." "Jules," said Mrs. Okafor-Briggs from the kitchen doorway. "He got asked to leave," Jules said with careful revision. "Because of the thing with Mr. Jules." The matter was dropped. But Sera filed it away. That night, after the children were in their rooms, she sat at the piano in the east sitting room. A Steinway that hadn't been played in what she judged was several months, given the tension in the strings and the thin layer of dust on the fallboard, and she played very quietly. Not a performance, not a rehearsal, just sound. Her hands remembered things her voice couldn't do anymore. She didn't know he was there until she finished, and the silence settled, and then she heard the creak of a floorboard in the hallway and looked up and found a man standing in the doorway. He was not what she had expected. The listing, the estate, the car, she had assembled a picture in her mind, some variation on Everett Vane's category of man, loud in his authority, comfortable with himself in a way that took up space. Declan Thorne was not comfortable. He was standing in the doorway of his own sitting room like a man who wasn't sure he was permitted to enter. He was somewhere in his late 30s, dark-haired, with the kind of face that held tension the way wood holds water, not showing it until it cracked. He had a glass of something in his hand and he was looking at her like she'd done something surprising. "I was told the position was filled," he said. "It was," Sera said. "I filled it." A pause. "You played that from memory?" "Yes." "What is it?" "Something I wrote," she said. "A long time ago." Before, she stopped. "A while ago." He looked at her for another moment. Then he looked away, around the room like he was orienting himself. "The children," he said. "How were they?" It wasn't quite a question. She answered it like one anyway. "Jules is testing me. Emmeline is waiting to see what I do." Ottiline was asleep. "Griffin," she paused, considered. "Griffin is the one I'm worried about." Declan Thorne looked back at her. "He won't play. I know. He told me it stopped meaning anything." Another pause. "He's 13, and something knocked the meaning out of him, and I'd like to know what it was before I try to put it back." Something moved in Declan Thorne's expression. "Quickly, and then gone. I'll have Mrs. Okafor-Briggs send you the file," he said. He left. She sat for a moment in the quiet, and then she closed the piano lid and went to bed. The file explained some things. Declan Thorne's wife, the children's mother, had died 18 months ago. Cardiovascular event, sudden in the city. She'd been a musician. Not professional, but serious. The kind of serious that shapes a household. The piano had been hers. Griffin had been her project, her particular joy. She'd been driving him home from his conservatory lesson when it happened. Sera read the file twice and then set it down and sat in the quiet of her room for a long time. That explained Griffin's hands. That explained the piano with no one playing it. That explained Emmeline in the library staring at nothing. And Jules, who spoke too much, who had probably learned to fill silences because the silence in this house had weight. That explained Declan Thorne in the doorway, holding his glass like a man surprised to find himself still standing. The next morning she came downstairs early and found Ottiline awake and extremely energetic in the kitchen, and the bite Mrs. Okafor-Briggs had warned her about turned out to be literal. The child sank her teeth into Sera's sleeve within the first 4 minutes of acquaintance, with conviction and no obvious remorse. "Good morning," Sera said. Ottiline let go of her sleeve. sat back and regarded her. "You smell like the piano room," Ottoline announced. "I was in there last night, Mama's room." Sera paused. "Is that what you call it?" Ottoline looked at her for a long, unblinking moment. Then she picked up her spoon and ate her cereal, and did not bite Sera again that day. Weeks had a shape here that they hadn't had in months. Morning. Ottoline until noon, because the 4-year-old did not have patience for formal lessons, but had enormous patience for stories, for drawing, for being read to in the big chair by the window and occasionally correcting Sera's pronunciation of specific dinosaur names. Afternoon, Emmeline and Jules together, then separately. Evening, Griffin when he came. He didn't come every evening. Some nights he ate dinner and went upstairs, and that was the end of it. Sera didn't push. She sat at the piano and played, and left the door to the sitting room open, and after the second week, she became aware that he sometimes stopped in the hallway outside, and stood there, not coming in, just listening. She played his mother's music when she found it. Sheet music in the piano bench, annotated in a cramped, precise hand. Someone who had worked through these pieces seriously. She played them poorly, at first, because they weren't her style, and some of them were technically outside her primary strengths. She played them anyway. She played them until they made sense. The third week, Griffin came in and sat in the chair in the corner without speaking. Sera kept playing. When she finished the piece she'd been working through, she said without turning around, "She marked the fingering differently here." She pointed to a passage. "It's not what I would do, but it works better." She had longer reach than me, I think. A long silence, then. "She did, her hands were, yeah." She turned to look at him. He was staring at the page of music she'd left open on the stand. "Did she teach you this ones?" She started to. He stopped. "We didn't finish." Sera moved over on the bench without saying anything. He looked at the space she'd left, and then he looked at her, and then, slowly, like someone walking into cold water, he sat down. She didn't make it a lesson. She played the piece through again, and when she reached the passage where the annotations ended, and the music continued on into measures his mother hadn't marked, she slowed down. "What do you think happens here?" she said. He looked at it for a moment. Then, very quietly, he put his right hand on the keys. Mrs. Okafor-Briggs found her in the kitchen later with what Sera realized, surprised, was the specific tiredness that comes after crying without crying, that sandpaper feeling behind the eyes. "I heard music," Mrs. Okafor-Briggs said, not looking up from her tea. "We worked through a piece, both of you." "Yes." Mrs. Okafor-Briggs nodded once and poured Sera a cup without being asked. She ran into Declan Thorne on a Sunday afternoon. Not figuratively, literally, around a corner near the back staircase, because apparently the tendency to move at speed through this house was not exclusive to Jules. He caught her by the elbow before she fell. She grabbed the doorframe. They stood for a moment in the slightly breathless aftermath of collision. "Sorry," he said. "It's your house," she said. He let go of her elbow. He was in older clothes. Paint on his forearm, the kind of paint that comes from house maintenance rather than artistry. It made him look different, less defended. "How is Griffin?" he said. "Better," slowly. She paused. "He's going to want to go back to lessons at some point. Real lessons, with a teacher who specializes. I'm not. This is not permanent, what I'm doing with him. He's too good for what I can offer." Something in Declan Thorne's face shifted slightly, like she'd surprised him again. "You're telling me you've worked your way to redundant. I'm telling you he's ready to move forward. Which is the point." She met his gaze. "I'm not trying to make myself necessary here, Mr. Thorne. I'm trying to help your kids." He looked at her for a long, still moment. "Why did you leave Montreal?" he said. It was not on any intake form she'd filled out. It was not a question about her qualifications. She thought about lying. She thought about deflecting, which she was good at. "My mother arranged a marriage," she said instead. "Signed a contract. I left." He was quiet for long enough that she started to feel the weight of what she'd said. "That's not legal," he said. "That's what Polly said." "Who's Polly, my friend?" He was still looking at her with that particular stillness, the kind that wasn't blankness but concentration, like he was listening to something underneath the words. "You haven't gone back," he said, "to fight it." There's nothing to fight yet. I left before they could do anything with it." She paused. "And I needed to be somewhere else for a while." He nodded once and said nothing else. He moved to step past her. She stepped aside. Then he stopped. "Jules said you've started a choir," he said. "In the kitchen on Wednesday afternoons." She winced slightly. It's not a choir. It's just, he and Emmeline were arguing about whether you could harmonize using only 2 people, so I was demonstrating. Ottiline sits on the counter and watches. She does. I thought you couldn't." He stopped. "The intake form," said your voice. She paused. "I can't sing at performance level. I can demonstrate basic technique. It's not the same thing." She considered. "I'm careful." He stood there for a moment. Then he said, "Carry on," and walked away, and she stood in the hallway and tried to decide what exactly had just happened. The phone call from her Uncle Bertrand came on a Tuesday. She didn't know how he'd found the number. Through her mother, probably. She let it ring twice and then picked up because avoidance had never, in her experience, made Bertrand smaller. "You're being irrational," he said, before she'd finished saying hello. "Good morning, Bertrand. Everett Vane is not going to wait indefinitely. This is an opportunity that—" "I'm not coming back," she said. "Tell Mr. Vane I wish him well. Tell my mother I'll call her when I'm ready. Sera, the contract is unenforceable," she said. "I checked." A silence. Then, "Your mother is beside herself. I know, I'm sorry about that part. But I'm not coming back for this," she hung up. She stood in the kitchen with the phone still in her hand, and the residue of the conversation settling over her. And then the kitchen door opened, and Emmeline came in looking for a snack, and Sera put her phone in her pocket, and asked if she wanted help with the thing she'd been working on in history, and they spent the next 20 minutes at the kitchen table, with a textbook open between them, and the call receded into something manageable. Later, she found a note on her desk. 3 lines in Declan Thorne's handwriting, which she recognized from a grocery list she'd seen pinned to the kitchen corkboard. "Mrs. Okafor-Briggs mentioned your personal situation. I should have asked at the start. If at any point your family makes contact in a way that is unwanted, please let me know. You are staff here. This house has lawyers." She read it 3 times. Then she set it down and looked at the window and felt something shift in her chest in a way she couldn't quite name. It was Griffin who told her. He told her over the piano, which was where they did most of their real talking now, sideways into the keys, as if the music running underneath gave words somewhere to go. "Dad used to play," he said, not looking at her. "Your father, he's not good. He was never good. But he used to play in the evening after he thought we were asleep. Just simple stuff." His hands moved idly over a quiet chord. He stopped after Mum died. Same time he stopped a lot of things. He paused. He laughs differently now. When he laughs, like he's surprised it happened. Sera listened. "He tries," Griffin said. "He's here. He comes to everything we have. He's carrying something heavy and he doesn't know how to put it down." "People learn," Sera said. Griffin looked at his hands on the keys. "Did you?" She thought about the apartment and her mother's face, and the examination room, and the green scarf in her bag. "I'm learning," she said. He nodded like that was an acceptable answer. December came. The estate changed with the cold. The covered porch became somewhere to leave boots. The bare trees filled in with ice that made a sound like music when the wind moved through them. Jules developed a strong opinion about the placement of the outdoor lights that Sera privately felt was well-reasoned. Ottiline acquired a felt hat she refused to remove, indoors or out. Emmeline asked Sera one evening carefully whether she was going to leave. Sera sat with the question for a moment. "Not immediately," she said. "The others left by December," Emmeline said. "Mostly by October." "Why?" Emmeline considered. "Dad is. He's very quiet, and this house is quiet. And there's a lot going on inside the quiet, and people don't know how to be with that." Sera looked at this 10-year-old girl who spoke like someone who had been listening very carefully to everything around her for 18 months. "I'm good with quiet," Sera said. Emmeline examined her for a long moment. Then she went back to her book, which Sera understood to be acceptance. 3 days later, Declan Thorne sat down at the piano for the first time since she'd arrived. She wasn't in the room. She heard it from the hallway, the same way Griffin had stood outside listening to her. A single chord. Then another. Something simple, broken into arpeggios, the way you play when you're not performing, when you're just reminding your hands that they still know how. She walked past without stopping. She sat in the kitchen with Mrs. Okafor-Briggs and drank her tea and listened to the house breathe. Mrs. Okafor-Briggs said without preamble, "He hasn't done that in a year and a half." Sera wrapped her hands around the mug. "I didn't do anything," she said. "No," Mrs. Okafor-Briggs agreed. "You were just here. You were just reliably here. And you stayed when the quiet got heavy, and apparently that was the thing." The situation with Everett Vane escalated in January. Bertrand had found a second lawyer, evidently, and sent a formal letter to the last address he had for Sera, which was her mother's apartment, but then sent a second one to Polly. Polly forwarded it immediately with a string of messages that were largely unprintable. Sera brought it to Declan Thorne, not because she expected him to fix it. She brought it to him because he had said this house has lawyers, and she was not too proud to take that seriously. He read the letter in 3 minutes. He handed it back. He picked up his phone and made a call in the other room that she was not party to, and came back 10 minutes later. "My legal team will contact Bertrand's lawyer tomorrow," he said. "They'll be very polite and extremely clear." Sera held the letter. "You didn't ask me for anything." He frowned slightly. "It's legal advice. You don't need to trade something for legal advice. Other people might want something in return for this." He looked at her with the expression she was coming to understand as him being very direct. "I am not other people," he said. She believed him. That was the part that surprised her. February. Griffin played at a small informal recital organized by the Regional Music Center. It was not a big event. 12 students, a rental hall, an audience of mostly parents. Griffin played a piece his mother had loved, from the annotated sheets in the piano bench, and he played it the way they had worked on it together, with all the unfinished measures finished, in the way they had decided together made sense. Declan Thorne sat in the second row and watched his son play. Sera stood at the back. She had told herself she was standing at the back because she might need to leave early. This was not true. Griffin played the piece clean through without stopping. At the end, there was a silence before the applause. The particular silence of an audience that has been somewhere unexpected and needs a moment before it comes back. Sera stood at the back of the hall and thought about a doctor's office and a contract on a mahogany table and a night in November when she walked out with her coat and her scarf and no plan at all, and she thought, "Here." The word arrived without context or completion. Just, "Here. This is where the walking brought me. This is what was on the other side." After the recital in the parking lot in the cold, Griffin found her before she got to the car. He stood in front of her and didn't say anything for a moment. "Thank you," he said. "It was yours," she said. "It was always yours." He nodded quickly, the way people nod when they're managing something that feels too large. Then he went back to his father and his siblings who were waiting near the car, and Jules said something that made Emmeline laugh, which was not a common sound and was therefore extraordinary, and Ottiline was wearing the felt hat and arguing with her own scarf. Declan Thorne looked across the parking lot at Sera. He didn't say anything, neither did she. He raised one hand, not a wave exactly, something quieter, an acknowledgement. A recognition. She raised hers back. Spring came late, the way it always does in Quebec. The bare field outside Sera's window filled in gradually. First the grey-green of early April, then something more deliberate, and by May there were mornings when she opened the window, and the air came in smelling like actual life, like things growing, like the ground finally warm enough to hold something new. She had been at the estate for 6 months. Her mother had called in March, not to argue, just to talk. It had lasted 20 minutes and contained no resolution, but it had been 20 minutes of 2 people trying, which was more than November had given them. The legal situation with Bertrand had dissolved without drama. The letter from Declan Thorne's lawyers had apparently been, as he said, very polite and extremely clear. Emmeline had started a corresponding friendship by letter with a girl from her books program in the city. Real letters, in envelopes. Sera had helped with the first draft. Emmeline had changed approximately 40% of it, which felt right. Jules had stopped testing Sera. He had replaced this with a different relationship that involved bringing her things. Drawings, rocks, a very small and serious beetle in a jar, and she accepted everything with the seriousness it merited. Ottiline had not bitten anyone in 3 months. This was considered an achievement. One evening in May, she and Declan Thorne ended up on the east porch at the same time, him with coffee and her with a score she'd been working through. Something she'd started composing again, quietly for the first time in 8 months. She hadn't told anyone. The pages were covered in pencil and second thoughts, and the particular chaos of a thing that was not yet ready to be shared. She put them face down when she saw him. He sat in the chair that had somehow become his chair. The way the arrangement of the porch had shifted over months of people being on it. Griffin wants to apply to a summer intensive, he said. In the city, 6 weeks, composition track. He should. He said you helped him find the application. He found it. I helped him fill it out. She paused. He's ready for more than I can give him. I've been telling you that. Declan Thorne looked out at the field. You've been telling me that since November. You've been not quite believing me since November. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something working its way toward one. What are those? He said, looking at the face-down pages. She didn't answer right away. Something I've been working on, she said eventually. Can I? Not yet, she said. It's not ready. He looked at her with that particular stillness. Will it be? She considered the question. She considered the field in May, and the ice in the trees in December, and a boy in a parking lot managing something too large. She considered that she had written more music in 6 months of not performing than she had in the 3 years before her voice gave out. She considered that the thing she'd thought was ending in Dr. Fenwick's office had turned out to be something else. Not an end, but a door she hadn't chosen into a life she hadn't planned, that had turned out to have more room in it than the one she'd been racing toward. Yes, she said. I think it will, he nodded. He drank his coffee. The light was going, and the field was green, and from somewhere inside the house came the sound of Jules explaining something at length to Emmeline and Ottiline's high, clear voice, naming something authoritatively, and then, under all of it, just barely carrying through the open window from the east sitting room, the sound of the piano. Griffin, working through something new, something she hadn't heard before, something that was his. Declan Thorne set down his coffee cup. He looked at her like he was about to say something and then didn't, and she understood that because she was not quite ready either, and there was time. There was, it turned out, quite a lot of time. She turned the pages back over and picked up her pencil, and in the last light of the May evening she kept writing.